Good evening, darlings. So tonight I have another anonymous message, which seems to have things to do with one of the previous videos, which was about any sexual tension with Thorn Oakenshield. I don't know if this is the same person or someone else who saw that video, but that's just a little bit of a heads up. So, Anonymous asks, since there's no sexual tension between you and Oakenshield, is there any between you and Bard? Darlings, 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 you know, there's not always unresolved sexual tension floating in the air between any two individuals. I mean, as perhaps for some people, but you know, I'm not really so driven, and you know, I think because Bard and I get along quite famously, you know, there's not really so much of a need for there to be any sort of tension involved. You know, that's not to say that we don't have our disagreements here, there, of course, but we don't really have that kind of anger behind being in each other's presence, which I was assuming was what was being read off of myself and Mr. Oakenshield. So no, there's no unresolved sexual tension there, none whatsoever. Because there's no there just isn't. It's quite simple. So you know, Bard and I are very close. I mean, not as close as this question is implying, of course, darlings. I know what you're doing there. Yeah, we're just very close friends, of course, darlings. You know, we often spend time together. You know, I'll bring a nice bottle or keg of wine with me, and you know, we'll have a good meal and we'll talk about various things. Sometimes we go out and do stuff together, you know, because we get along. There's not sort of that. There's no further expectation beyond that, certainly not on my part. You know, you're not sort of going into it expecting something to come out of spending that time together. So no, there's no unresolved sexual tension whatsoever. You know, it's a very sort of it's a very easy relationship, especially when compared to the other. I mean, it's night and day, darling. Truly, the contrast is incredible. You know, I think Bard is also a very, I think people have called him a very hard man before. You know, that he certainly has conviction, you know, that if he set his mind on something, he can be incredibly stubborn, but he still listens to reason. And I think that's sort of where things sort of derivate from Mr. Oakenshield, who will never ever listen to reason, even if it's hitting him in the face, which is something I have wanted to do on multiple occasions, but of course do not, because I can control these emotions, darlings. And perhaps that's why there's no unresolved sexual tension. I have complete control over my feelings and desires, and you know, if I wanted to engage in something like that, it wouldn't be something just hanging around in the air. I would just I'd just make something happen. So there's no need for any unresolved anything there, darling. So thank you so much for your question, and have a good evening. Cheers. Ta-ta.